The night was calm, but inside the hall, every seat was filled. Cameras pointed from every corner. Bright lights washed the stage, and the air was thick with whispers. People had gathered for what seemed like a normal award evening, but no one knew how history would unfold before their eyes. Something powerful was about to happen, the kind of moment that stays forever in the heart. Keanu Reeves walked to the stage with his steady steps, humble as always, dressed in simple black. There was no arrogance in his face, no pride in his walk, only quiet calm that carried weight heavier than gold. His presence pulled silence from the crowd. Every person in that hall, from the farthest seat to the first row, leaned forward, sensing something they could not explain. Sandra Bullock sat near the front. Her hands were clasped tightly together. She smiled faintly, but her heart was restless, full of storms. She had carried a truth inside her for many years, a truth that had shaped her life, guided her choices, and lived in every quiet corner of her soul. Tonight, under the bright lights and in front of thousands of eyes, she felt the moment pressing down on her chest. The event host spoke about Keanu's journey, about his kindness, his resilience, his struggles, and the way he had faced them without bitterness. Words of respect filled the room, but Sandra heard them differently. For her, those words were not only praise of a man the world admired. They were reminders of the bond she had once shared with him, the bond that had never truly left her. The night moved forward, award after award, applause after applause. Yet the tension inside Sandra grew. She kept looking at Keanu. His face was calm, his eyes soft, but there was also a weight of untold stories there. She knew those stories. She had seen pieces of them when their lives crossed many years ago. And now, after so much time, she carried her own story, one she had hidden from the world and from him. People around her whispered and cheered, but her mind was not in the hall anymore. It was back in the past. She remembered the early days, when both of them were young and standing side by side in a film set. She remembered the laughter, the small jokes, the silent care he gave in moments when cameras were off. She remembered the way his kindness had never felt like an act, and slowly she realized she had built a wall inside her, a wall that held back words she should have spoken long ago. As Keanu accepted another award, the hall shook with applause. He bowed gently. No pride, no show, just humility. The crowd respected him for that. But Sandra's heart pounded faster. Her chest tightened as if her own body was forcing her toward something. Then came the host's words. "Before we close, we would like to invite a very special guest on stage, someone who has shared history, friendship, and moments with Keanu." The spotlight turned. It landed on her. Sandra froze for a second, then stood up slowly. The crowd erupted in cheers. People clapped, smiled, some even shouted her name. She walked toward the stage, but every step felt heavy, almost like she was walking toward a truth she could no longer hide. Keanu turned to her with that familiar, calm smile. There was warmth in his eyes, the kind of warmth that could soften the hardest stone. Sandra reached the stage, stood beside him, and the lights burned brighter. The host handed her the microphone. "Would you like to say something?" Her throat was dry. Her hands trembled. She looked at the crowd, then back at Keanu. His face was patient, his silence encouraging. The crowd expected casual words, maybe a few jokes, maybe a memory from their old days. But inside Sandra's heart, something deeper was alive, something that had waited for years. Her lips parted. The hall went quiet. Even the cameras seemed to freeze. She whispered first, almost too soft for the microphone, "Keanu." The pause stretched long. Every ear leaned closer. "There is something I should have told you years ago." Her voice broke, and the tension wrapped around the entire hall. Keanu's expression shifted slightly. Not with fear, not with surprise, but with gentle understanding. As if he already knew, Sandra's chest rose and fell. Tears filled her eyes. Her voice grew stronger. "I need to confess something tonight. I need to say it in front of everyone, because keeping it inside all these years has been heavier than I can carry." The hall was frozen in absolute silence. Breaths were held. Hearts beat faster, and then, with all the courage she had, Sandra said the words that no one expected. "Keanu, I loved you then, and I love you still." The crowd gasped. The sound of her words still echoed through the hall like a soft thunder. "I loved you then, and I love you still." Gasps had already filled the room, but now the silence was heavier than before. People did not move, as if even the act of breathing would break the moment. Keanu stood still, his calm eyes fixed on her. He had been surprised many times in his life, but this was different. The man known for steady patience and quiet strength now faced something deeply personal, something the cameras could not truly capture. Sandra's hands trembled as she lowered the microphone slightly. Her heart raced, her chest tightened, yet at the same time she felt lighter than she had in years. The truth was finally out. She had carried it silently for so long, and now the weight was falling away. But with that release came fear. What would he say? How would he react in front of thousands watching, millions more who would see it later? The audience leaned forward, waiting for his reply. Whispers grew in the back rows. Some people smiled, some covered their mouths in shock, some looked at each other with wide eyes, but Keanu did not rush. He closed his eyes for a second, took a breath, and then opened them again. His voice was calm, steady, but also filled with warmth. "Thank you for saying that," he began. His words were simple, but the weight behind them was powerful. Sandra blinked back tears. She had not expected anger. She had not expected rejection, but hearing his gentle tone shook her more than any harsh word could. "We shared something real," he continued, turning slightly toward her. "And though time has passed, I always kept respect for what we had. I always kept respect for you." The hall remained silent, but the silence now carried emotion instead of shock. People felt the honesty in his voice. It was not a performance, not an act. It was truth spoken with humility. Sandra's throat tightened again. She wanted to speak, but her emotions were a storm. She remembered long nights of wondering what might have been, of wishing she had spoken sooner. And now, standing beside him, she realized that even though the past could not be changed, the present could still be true. She raised the microphone again, her voice shaking. "I was afraid. I was afraid of losing what we had if I said too much. I thought silence was safer. But silence only became heavier with every year. Tonight, I had to be brave." The audience erupted into applause, not because it was a show, but because they felt the raw courage in her words. Bravery was not only fighting battles outside, it was facing the truth inside, even when the heart trembled. Keanu looked out at the crowd, then back at Sandra. His face softened more, and though he still carried that calm strength, there was a glimmer of emotion in his eyes. He stepped closer, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. It was a gesture full of respect, not possession. "Life teaches us through time," he said, his voice strong now. "We learn through mistakes, through silence, through pain. But we also learn that kindness and honesty will always carry us forward." The audience clapped again, louder this time, some even standing. But still, the heart of the hall was with the two of them, standing side by side. Sandra felt tears roll down her face, but she did not look away. She met his eyes, and for the first time in many years, she felt no barrier between them. The host, who had been frozen in shock, finally spoke, trying to steady his voice. This is a moment none of us will ever forget." Laughter broke gently across the hall, not mocking laughter, but the kind that comes when tension softens. But beneath that laughter was something else. Suspense. Because even though Sandra had confessed, even though Keanu had answered with kindness, the question still lingered. What would this mean for them now? Was this only a moment of truth shared in public, or the beginning of something new? As the evening continued, people clapped and cheered, but every camera remained pointed at them. Their faces, their expressions, their silence between words. It was all history now. When the event ended and the hall began to empty, whispers filled the air like fire spreading through dry grass. Some said they had just witnessed love return. Some said it was only nostalgia. Others said it was destiny trying once again to bring two kind souls together. Sandra and Keanu walked off the stage side by side. No one knew what they spoke in those quiet steps away from the lights. But what was clear was that the world was not done with this story. The confession was only the beginning, and in the distance, beyond the cameras, beyond the cheers, a new chapter waited, a chapter that neither of them had expected to face. The night outside the hall was cool and calm, but inside Sandra's heart the storm was still raging. She walked beside Keanu in silence as cameras flashed behind them and voices called their names. Every step felt heavy. Her confession had been heard by thousands, yet the only reaction that mattered was his. He had spoken kindly. He had not rejected her, but his words had left questions open, questions that pressed against her mind with every breath. They reached a quiet corner backstage, away from the bright lights. The noise of the crowd faded into a dull echo. Only the two of them remained in that private silence. Sandra leaned against the wall, trying to steady her heartbeat. Keanu stood a few feet away, his hands folded loosely in front of him, his eyes soft but unreadable. "I never meant to put you in such a hard place," she whispered, her voice trembling. I couldn't hold it inside anymore." Keanu looked at her for a long moment before answering. "You spoke your truth. There's nothing wrong with that. Honesty takes courage." His tone was calm, but behind his eyes there was something deeper, something she could not quite read. Her tears threatened to fall again. "But did I make a mistake saying it here, like this, in front of everyone? I don't even know what it means for you. I don't know if it made things harder." Keanu stepped closer. His voice lowered, almost like a secret meant only for her. "Life has always been hard, Sandra, but kindness makes it easier to carry. Your words tonight weren't a mistake. They were real, and real things are never mistakes." Her chest tightened with emotion. She wanted to believe him, but her fears still whispered inside. The years they had lost, the silence that had stretched between them, the choices that had taken them in different directions. Could those wounds truly heal? Before she could ask, a knock came at the door. A young assistant peeked in nervously. "Mr. Reeves, Mrs. Bullock, the press is waiting." "They want a statement." Sandra froze. She had expected questions, but she was not ready for the storm outside. Keanu nodded slowly to the assistant, then looked back at her. "We don't owe the world more than we are ready to give," he said gently. "Let's step carefully." They walked together toward the waiting press. The hallway buzzed with voices, cameras clicking like thunder. As soon as they stepped into view, reporters shouted questions. "Sandra, was that confession real? Keanu, do you feel the same way? Are you two together again?" Flashes blinded their eyes, microphones pushed forward. The chaos was overwhelming, but Keanu lifted his hand slightly and the crowd quieted, sensing his calm authority. "What you heard tonight," he said firmly, "was honesty. It was not a performance. It was not a game. It was one human being speaking her truth, and I will not let that truth be treated as gossip." His voice, steady and respectful, rolled through the crowd of reporters like a wave. Some lowered their microphones, others exchanged looks, but all of them knew they had just been warned with kindness and strength. Sandra stood beside him, moved by his protection. She had feared he might turn away, that her confession might push him into silence or distance. But here he was, standing not just beside her, but for her. The press eventually backed off, realizing no more would be revealed tonight. Keanu and Sandra left together, stepping into the night air. The city lights glowed around them. Cars passed by. But in that moment it felt like the world had shrunk to only the two of them. They walked slowly down the street, without cameras now, without shouting voices. Sandra finally broke the silence. "Why didn't you answer them?" Keanu's eyes met hers. "Because the world doesn't deserve an answer before you do. Whatever I say, I will say it to you first." Her heart shook. For years she had dreamed of hearing words like that, but now that they were here, the fear returned. What if the answer was not what she wanted? What if kindness was the only gift he had left to give her? They reached a small cafe still open on the corner. Keanu paused, then gestured gently. "Do you want to sit? We can talk here." No cameras, no stage, Sandra nodded. They stepped inside. The warm smell of coffee and bread wrapped around them, and the quiet hum of soft music filled the space. They sat across from each other at a small wooden table, the dim light above them casting a soft glow. For a moment, neither spoke. They only looked at each other, two souls carrying years of silence, ready, at last, to break it. Then Sandra whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Keanu, do you still feel the same for me?" His eyes lowered for a moment, his hands resting gently on the table. The pause stretched long, filled with suspense. Finally, he lifted his gaze. His voice was quiet but powerful. "Sandra, the truth is, I never stopped caring." Her breath caught. The world around them blurred. The cafe, the city, the night. It all disappeared in that moment. All that remained was the truth finally beginning to rise between them. The cafe was quiet, almost too quiet. Sandra sat frozen in her seat, her hands pressed tightly together. She replayed his words again and again inside her head. "I never stopped caring." They were simple words, yet they carried the weight of everything she had feared, everything she had hoped for, everything she had tried to bury in silence. Her throat was dry, but her heart was racing faster than ever. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low and trembling. "Then why didn't you ever say something?" Keanu looked down at the table for a moment. His fingers traced the rim of the coffee cup. Then he lifted his eyes to meet hers. "Because life isn't always kind with timing," he said softly. "We were both building our lives. We were both facing storms. I thought staying silent was the better choice. I thought giving you freedom was respect." Sandra blinked quickly as tears threatened again. But silence hurt more than words ever could. It left me wondering, year after year, if I had lost something I never truly had. He nodded slowly, his calm face showing a flicker of pain. "I know, and I carry that too. Silence is heavy. It becomes a chain. But tonight you broke it. You had the courage I didn't." The words struck deep in her heart. She had thought her confession might ruin everything, might push him away. Instead, it had opened a door that both of them had kept locked for too long. They sat in silence for a moment, only the faint music of the cafe filling the air. Then Keanu leaned forward slightly, his tone firmer. "But Sandra, caring and loving are not the same. I need to be honest with you. I don't want to give you false hope. I need to understand what we are before I tell the world we are something more." The honesty in his voice hurt, but it was not cruel. It was respect, the kind of respect he had always shown. Sandra nodded, her hands trembling. "Then let's talk. Let's not run away again." For the first time that night, a faint smile touched his lips. "Yes, let's not run away again." As they spoke, the cafe door opened and a group of late-night customers walked in. Whispers spread as a few of them recognized the two stars sitting together. Phones were raised, pictures snapped. Sandra's chest tightened again. "The world won't let this be private," she murmured. Keanu's calm remained unshaken. "The world can watch, but only we decide what's real." The cafe owner, an elderly man with kind eyes, noticed the scene. He walked over quickly and placed a hand on the shoulder of one of the customers holding a phone. "Please, not here. Let them be people tonight, not headlines." To Sandra's surprise, the customers lowered their phones. Some even apologized quietly. The owner smiled gently at her and Keanu. "You're safe here." For the first time that night, Sandra felt relief. There were still people who understood respect, who valued kindness over gossip. The night stretched on as they talked, about old memories, about mistakes, about moments of laughter from years ago. Sandra's tears came and went, but each time Keanu's calm voice steadied her. As the hours passed, she realized something important. Love was not only about the feelings that burned brightly in youth. It was also about the quiet respect that survived through years of silence. It was about standing beside each other even when the world demanded answers. When they finally stepped back outside, dawn was breaking. The sky was painted in soft colors of blue and gold. The city was still waking, and the world felt strangely peaceful. Sandra took a deep breath of the cool morning air. "So what happens now?" she asked softly. Keanu looked at the horizon for a moment before answering. Now we walk forward. Not as actors, not as headlines, but as two people who still have something to discover. Her chest swelled with emotion, a mixture of fear and hope. She nodded slowly. Then let's walk. They began walking down the quiet street together, their steps slow, their hearts uncertain. But for the first time in years, their silence was not heavy. It was full of possibility. Yet in the shadows of the city, behind the peace of dawn, the storm of media waited. By noon, their story would be everywhere. Their confession, their café, their words, captured and repeated around the world. They did not know it yet, but the true test was only beginning. By the time the sun had risen high above the city, the storm had already begun. Screens across the world were flashing with the news. Headlines ran wild, each one louder than the last. Sandra's shocking confession. Keanu's silent answer. Is love reborn? Millions of eyes replayed the video of her trembling voice and his steady gaze. Millions of hearts argued, speculated, and dreamed. Inside her small apartment, Sandra sat on the couch, her phone buzzing endlessly. Messages from friends, colleagues, even strangers filled the screen. Some cheered her courage, others doubted her choice, and a few judged her harshly. She turned the phone face down and pressed her hands against her forehead. The silence in her apartment was heavy, but it was broken by a knock at the door. She hesitated, then opened it. Keanu stood there, calm as always, holding 2 cups of coffee in his hands. "I thought you might need this," he said simply. Her lips curved into a weak smile. "You always know." She stepped aside to let him in. They sat together at the table, sipping coffee while the world outside exploded with noise. The weight of thousands of opinions pressed against them. But in the quiet of the room, it felt like they had carved out a small island of peace. "I don't regret what I said," Sandra whispered, breaking the silence. "But I don't know how to live with the noise that follows." Keanu looked at her gently. "Noise is temporary. Truth is permanent. The world shouts for a day, then it forgets. But what we said, that will remain." She met his eyes, tears rising again. "But what if the truth breaks us? What if it's too much?" He shook his head slowly. "Truth never breaks. Lies break. Silence breaks. Truth only bends until we are strong enough to carry it." His words were calm, but his eyes carried a shadow, as if even he was not sure how much strength they had left. The phone buzzed again, louder this time. Sandra turned it over and her breath caught. It was a message from a producer they both knew. The message was short, but it carried weight. "The studio wants answers. You need to control the story before it controls you." Her hand trembled as she set the phone down. "They want us to explain ourselves to protect their image." Keanu's expression grew firmer. "We are not their story. We are our own." The strength in his voice steadied her, but the storm outside was real. The media was growing hungrier, and the industry was circling like wolves. Later that afternoon, they met at a private office with their closest team members. The room buzzed with nervous energy as managers and advisors spoke in quick, urgent tones. "We need to release a statement," one said. "We can't let tabloids twist this," another warned. "Do you want to deny it? Do you want to say it was misinterpreted?" Sandra's chest tightened. She wanted to scream. Deny it? Pretend her words were nothing but confusion? She had just fought against years of silence, and now they wanted her to bury the truth again. She turned to Keanu, searching his face. His calm was unshaken, but his eyes met hers with quiet fire. "We will not deny the truth," he said firmly. "We may not give them all the answers, but we will not lie. Not about this." The room fell silent. His words cut through the noise with the sharpness of steel wrapped in kindness. Sandra felt strength return to her chest. She straightened her back and spoke clearly. "Then we will speak, but in our own way. No rehearsed lines, no false smiles. Only truth." Their managers exchanged uneasy looks, but neither Sandra nor Keanu wavered. The decision was made. That evening, they stood side by side once more. This time not on a glittering stage, but in front of a simple camera. No grand hall, no loud music, no golden lights. Only them, sitting in a quiet room with the world watching. Sandra took a deep breath and spoke first. What I said was not planned, not scripted, and not for attention. It was something I carried for too long. I spoke it because silence had become too heavy, and I stand by every word. She looked at Keanu, her eyes steady now. He placed his hand gently on the table and leaned forward. And what I said in return was also true. I never stopped caring. But caring means more than headlines. Caring means respect. We will not turn this into a show. We will walk forward, carefully, with honesty. Their words spread across the world within minutes. Some cheered, some doubted, but all listened, because in a world full of noise and drama, their voices carried something rare: sincerity. But as the camera light switched off and the silence returned, Sandra felt a chill. She knew the battle was not over. The confession had opened hearts, but it had also opened doors for judgment, pressure, and old wounds. And deep inside, she wondered, could love truly survive under the weight of the world's gaze? The following days were not gentle. The world had no mercy when it smelled a story this big. Newspapers printed their faces on every page. Television shows debated their confession as if it were a political scandal. Social media exploded with endless opinions. Some called it beautiful, some mocked it, and some turned it into jokes. Sandra sat by her window at night, staring at the city lights. She felt exposed, as if every shadow outside was another pair of eyes judging her. She had spoken her truth, but now that truth had been twisted into something she could hardly recognize. Her phone buzzed again and again. Friends checking in, strangers sending messages, gossip reporters pretending to care. She turned the phone off and buried her face in her hands. The knock on the door was soft, but steady. She knew it was him before she opened it. Keanu stood there quiet, his face calm as always. He didn't need words to explain why he came. He simply stepped inside and sat beside her. "They won't stop," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everywhere I look, it's us. It's my words. They took something real and made it a spectacle." Keanu looked at her gently. The world always wants to turn truth into entertainment. But what matters is that we don't lose the truth ourselves. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. For a moment, she felt safe. He was steady, like a rock in the middle of a storm. But even rocks are tested when waves crash too hard. The next morning, her manager called. "Sandra, the studio is reconsidering your role in the next film. They think the attention might be bad for the project." Her heart sank. It was happening. The confession that freed her was now threatening to chain her career. "Are they punishing me for being honest?" she asked quietly. "They're protecting their money," the manager replied. "They don't care about honesty." Sandra sat frozen after the call ended. Fear crawled up her spine. Was the price of truth her future? Later that day, she told Keanu. He listened silently, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed. When she finished, he spoke firmly. "You will not let them silence you again. If they want to punish you for honesty, then they are the ones who should be ashamed, not you." Her eyes filled with tears. "But what if I lose everything?" He reached across the table, taking her trembling hand in his steady grip. "You won't lose everything, because you still have your truth, and you still have me." His words wrapped around her heart like a shield. Yet she knew the fight ahead would not be easy. That evening, they walked together through a park, away from cameras. People noticed them. Some whispered, some took photos, but neither stopped walking. Children played nearby, their laughter ringing in the air. An elderly couple walked hand in hand, smiling softly as they passed. Life continued, simple and pure, reminding them that the world was bigger than gossip. Sandra slowed her steps. "Do you ever wonder if we waited too long? If maybe our moment passed years ago?" Keanu looked at the children running freely across the grass. "I don't believe in missed moments. I believe life gives us the right moment when we are ready. Maybe we weren't ready before. Maybe now we are." Her chest ached with hope and fear all at once. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that timing did not destroy what was real. As the sun set and the sky turned golden, they sat on a bench together. The air was cool, the world quieter. Sandra turned to him, her voice shaking. "Keanu, are you saying you still love me?" The pause between them stretched long, heavy with suspense. His eyes searched hers, his calm steady but layered with unspoken emotion. Finally his voice came low and clear. "Sandra." I never stopped. Her breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears that spilled freely now. The confession she had dreamed of, the words she had feared she would never hear, were finally spoken. But before her heart could fully grasp the joy, a new sound broke the peace, the click of a camera. Loud and sharp in the quiet park, she turned quickly. A photographer hid in the bushes, capturing everything. The moment was theirs, but now it was stolen. The storm was about to grow even louder. The sharp click of the camera echoed like a thunderclap through the quiet park. Sandra's heart dropped as she turned to see the photographer crouched low, lens pointed straight at them. Keanu's hand still held hers, but she felt the weight of the world pressing down again. Their moment, so pure, had been stolen. The photographer darted away before they could react. Sandra's chest tightened with panic. "Tomorrow it will be everywhere," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They'll twist it again. They'll take this too." Keanu did not flinch. His calm was unbroken, though his eyes carried sorrow. "They can take pictures, but they can't take what's real. What we said, what we feel, that belongs only to us." But she trembled still, tears spilling as fear returned. "I'm not as strong as you, Keanu. I can't live under their eyes forever." He turned fully to her, his hand steady on hers. "Strength isn't never being afraid. Strength is walking forward even when you are afraid. And you're stronger than you think." Her heart cracked open. The man before her was the same calm soul she had known years ago. The same steady presence who gave kindness when the world gave cruelty. But now, his kindness was carrying her too. The next morning, as they feared, the photos exploded across the world. Headlines screamed louder than ever. "Caught in the park. Their secret love revealed." The truth behind the confession. Sandra sat on her couch, eyes red from sleeplessness. Keanu sat beside her, his arm resting quietly behind her, not to claim her, but to protect her. The storm outside had never been louder, yet inside the room he gave her silence. She could breathe in. The phone buzzed again, another call from a studio, another demand for control. Sandra picked it up, but this time her voice was clear. "I will not deny who I am. I will not deny what I said. If that costs me roles, then so be it." She ended the call before they could argue. She turned to Keanu, tears glistening in her eyes. "I feel free and terrified at the same time." He smiled faintly. "That's what truth feels like." Days passed, the noise slowly shifting. Some voices still mocked, but others grew louder with support. People began to admire her courage, admire their honesty. What began as a storm of gossip turned into a story of resilience, of two people who refused to let the world shame them for speaking their hearts. A week later, they appeared together on stage again, not for a film, not for a show, but for a charity event helping children in need. The crowd erupted as they walked side by side. Sandra's chest shook with nerves, but Keanu's steady hand grounded her. She stepped forward to the microphone, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger. "Life teaches us to hide our hearts, to stay silent, to protect ourselves from pain. But I learned that silence is heavier than fear. Tonight, I want every child here to know, your truth matters. Your kindness matters. Never be ashamed of who you are." The hall rose in applause. Keanu stepped forward after her, his voice calm and powerful. "Strength is not in perfection. Strength is in humility, in kindness, in respect. And tonight we stand here not because we are fearless, but because we chose honesty over silence." The crowd erupted again, louder than before. Some cried, some clapped, but all of them felt the sincerity that filled the room. Sandra looked at him, her heart swelling. She had once feared her confession would break everything. Instead, it had built something stronger. Later that night, as they walked quietly together under the soft glow of the streetlights, Sandra turned to him. Her voice was gentle, trembling not with fear, but with love. "Keanu, thank you for not letting me carry this alone." He looked at her, his eyes calm, steady, and filled with truth. "You never had to carry it alone. Not then, not now, not ever again." They stopped walking, standing still beneath the glowing night sky. For the first time in years, no words were needed. Their silence was not heavy anymore. It was full of peace, full of respect, full of love. The world would keep talking, the headlines would keep spinning, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that after all the years, after all the silence, they had finally spoken their truth, and in that truth they found freedom.